We're speaking here on The Colour of Country Life with Jonathan Pietzsch. He's backing up from his run for Mackillop in the state election. He's going for the seat of Barker. How are you, Jonathan?
I'm very well, thanks, Ricky. Thanks for having me on.
No worries. And I see Mark Brace for Labor. Looks like he's backing up just like you are from Mackillop to have a crack at the federal seat. Bit of overlap there between the two seats, but a fair bit more to cover in Barker.
Absolutely. Barker is almost 5 state seats within its boundaries now, so it's, in my opinion, far too big. But that's unfortunately the reality of geography and population.
Yeah, and I guess that's a good starting point, really. You know, these seats will only get smaller in terms of what you need to cover. Similarly with Grey, if we had more people living in regional areas, what's the National Party's policy to try and grow regional population?
Absolutely. So one of our key platforms is decentralisation and regionalisation, and encouraging as many industries as possible to relocate to the bush, and in some cases even government departments to ensure that people making the decisions are closer to the people that they affect.
Now, I gather you're the National Party state president as well. You're clearly, very long-time supporter of the National Party. Or what's been your motivation to run for Barker itself? Is it frustration with Tony Pasin, or simply believing it would be better represented by a Nationals MP?
No, look, I believe it would be better represented by a Nationals MP. As you said, I'm state president and been with the Nationals for a long time. And I believe in what we've got to offer, that having a dedicated regional representative party is pretty unique in the world to Australia, and that South Australia needs a National Party MP in Canberra.
And are you the only lower house candidate in South Australia? I don't see a National running for the seat of Grey when nominations closed on Friday. Have you got a Senate candidate? Who else is running in South Australia?
Yeah, that's correct, Ricky. I'm the only one in the lower house in Barker, and we've got 2 running in the Senate. We've got Lisa Sherry from Murray Bridge and Damien Bias running, both candidates at the state election who have put their hands up to run for us there.
Now, we often associate the National Party with agriculture. Of course, David Littleproud is a Nationals deputy leader federally and is the agriculture minister. What is the National Party saying to the voters in Barker, particularly the farming communities, what you want to deliver to them in this federal election?
Look, we want to deliver ongoing growth in agriculture, and David Littleproud particularly has been looking at a number of programs to enable, I suppose one of the key things at the moment is supply chain issues, so looking at ways to keep manufactured fertiliser local and other things like that ensure that farmers have the product they need when it's needed.
Yeah, that's an interesting one you raise. I know it's across the electorate border into Grey, the Lee Creek, this Urea project we've talked about often. Rowan Ramsey's finally started talking about this Urea opportunity at Lee Creek, but are those the kind of initiatives that you'd like to see a federal government backing in earlier to make sure we are producing more of those things our farmers need on Australian shores?
Absolutely, and there has been federal funding put towards a similar project in Western Australia. The Lee Creek project, I think, is quite exciting. There's a similar project in Western Australia that's now received some federal funding. If we can get most of our nitrogen production to occur within Australia, it's really going to add a lot of security to Australian farming production.
Yeah, your initial press release about your candidacy sort of make a virtue about the possibility that if you were a Nationals held seat in the seat of Barker, you'd see a lot more funding or positives from the federal government flowing to it. I mean, you mentioned Western Australia. Why is the National Party constantly investing in Northern Australia as opposed to maybe a seat like Barker or Grey?
Well, there's certainly a lot of growth opportunities in the north with the water security up there. But the National Party federally is delivering on a number of nation-building projects that we've pushed forward, like the Inland Rail. And I think that's the sort of visionary type stuff that we need to be seeing more of in South Australia. Yeah,
and when you say visionary projects for South Australia, what do you have in mind in terms of what could happen in regional South Australia as that type of visionary project? I know that these projects are happening in Nationals held or seats the Nationals are pursuing nationwide. You're pursuing a seat in South Australia. What sort of nation-building projects could we see in Barker?
Look, I think there's an opportunity for further water security, particularly with ongoing changing in power supply. We need to be looking at local generation that really, again, going back to that development thing, we really need to be growing the development of regional South Australia. We're far too concentrated as a population base into Adelaide compared to we're the most concentrated in the nation. And we need to be looking at projects that encourage growth and manufacturing industry in the regions.
You mentioned water there, for instance, and water security. What is the position regarding the extra gigalitres of water to come down the Murray-Darling Basin into South Australia? I know Adrian Adrian Pederick in the seat of Hammond has said he supports that coming downstream, but the National Farmers Federation don't. Where do you stand as the Nationals candidate for Barker?
Look, I stand in support of that and probably at odds with my federal colleagues on it. And I've had this debate and argument with them on the federal conference and council floor in Canberra when we have those meetings. I think it's important for irrigator security as well that we do have that flow, but I think we need to be looking at other ways of supplementing our water supply in South Australia. And look, I'll probably be told it's not economical, but we've got a desal plant that doesn't do anything for most of the time. So there's got to be other ways that we can look to alleviate some of the water pressures.
Yeah, and just on that, you mentioned energy just before. What are you talking about in terms of some energy security for South Australia? Are we talking nuclear energy, or what are you putting on the table?
Look, I think we really need to look at some of the options, whether that's small-scale nuclear. One of the things we talked about during the state campaign was regionalising the grid and providing both a national security interest in that, in the sectionalised grid, but also in looking at ways that we can provide cheaper power.
All right, well, we'll catch up with you about that further on in the campaign. Got to leave it there for now. But Jonathan, thanks for joining us and all the best for the 21st of May.
Thank you very much, Ricky, and thanks for having me on.